All of the views and opinions expressed here are those of the individual speaking and may not be representative of Konig American. At times, language may be considered vulgar. Listener discretion is suggested.
You are now listening to the Konig Behind the Wheel podcast.
All right, we're live. With me is Joey Redman. You know him. It's nice to see you back here. We're back. Drift fans, we are back, and we're here. And Fdsea Seattle. Pretty dope. So, we're going to run through your 10 points. Before we get started on your 10 points, we're going to go right to the middle of the pack and see if we can get a special guest onto the line here. So your point number 5, the electric Chevy Camaro goes missing. It's accurate. Travis Reeder came out in his S13 when people were expecting to kind of see that Camaro doing some stuff.
Hello.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. You're on the podcast, sort of.
Cool.
So we were just getting to Joey's point number 5, which is the Camaro kind of went missing. I feel like we had it going, and we'd seen it qualify, and people, I think, were maybe expecting that car to make a return. But what was the reason that we decided, that you guys decided not to run the car?
Yeah, so I don't know if everyone saw a video that we posted. Basically, we had our proof of concept as the first electric professional drift car, right? And we were able to get it going and provide a car that ran at its own level. We found its strengths and we found its weaknesses. And basically, we decided as a team that it's time to start developing version 2. So now we're in the stages of redevelopment, and we're cracking down to make this thing as competitive as we know it can be, basically.
Right. So, and I think if people were watching on social media, if you follow Napoleon Motorsports, you'll see that they kind of hinted at exactly that. And kind of mentioned that they were kind of going to V2, right?
Yep. Yeah. So obviously with a car like that being a new chassis and a super new style of power plant, things take a lot of time to develop. So luckily we have Old Red in the trailer at all times. So it'll be sitting in at rounds that we don't feel the EO1 is up to par. And in the meantime, we'll just be developing that car as quickly as we can to get it up to speed, because in the long term, our goal is to campaign an electric professional drift car, and we're not stopping till we get one that is going to shred with the best of them. So that's our game plan. Right.
And then, so you guys ran this car at Wall the last round, and it looked like, the power and some of the things that you went through there was an obstacle. How kind of soon after Wall did you guys make the decision that it probably was in the best interest to kind of go to your S13 for Seattle?
We did a lot of testing in between rounds earlier this year and found weaknesses and work towards fixing those as quickly as possible. We experienced kind of an issue at Atlanta when we ran it, and then thought we had it kind of covered, and then came to Jersey and experienced a similar issue, essentially just with power and longevity of power. So there's a lot of factors that go into play with that, whether it be the motor setup, the batteries, and there's a lot of things that kind of tie in to create the issues that we had. We don't like using the word issues. It's more like speed bumps.
Sure.
But, so it was pretty soon through qualifying in Jersey that we realized that it's time to kind of step up and start building for the next generation car.
Right. All right. Well, I can ask you probably a dozen other questions, but the truth is, I just wanted to kind of grab you as we kind of cruise through Joey's point number 5 to kind of give you the ability to kind of not let us put words in what's actually happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no worries. And I'm always down to give you guys the insight you need. So
no, I appreciate it. Joe, you have anything for Travis before I let him go back to actually having a life?
I don't think so. I think you can go have a life.
All right, Joey said you can go have a life, and I appreciate you taking a few minutes to hop on real quick.
Yeah, man, no worries. Anytime.
All right, I'll catch up with you later.
All right, man. Yeah,
All right.
We'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, take care.
Yep, you too. Bye.
All right, so we jumped to point number 5. Hey, man, listen, you're going to have a lot of people on this subject that are going to either throw a lot of shade or be real supportive of kind of this whole movement. I have a feeling that you have your own very, very unique take, and I'd like to hear what it is.
About the Camaro?
You can say anything you want to do.
I mean, I hope that they can inevitably build a competitive Formula D car. I mean, the car is clearly not competitive at the moment. I mean, it's workable. It's functional. I mean, they've successfully tandemed it, but it's not. I mean, it's missing things. So, I mean, it sounds to me like they know that, and they're gonna, fix them or attempt to fix them or attempt to build a new car. So I think it's cool that they're dedicated to the project because it's definitely not going to be easy.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think I kind of on the same pathway I think you are, which is I think we all knew that the car in its state wasn't competitive. I think there was a hope that, because we don't know the limitations and because we don't know their every inner move, we didn't know, is there a way to turn the wick up? Is there more power there on tap we just haven't seen yet? Were they running through other issues that was causing them from being able to make more power? I know that to be somewhat true. I also know that the version 2 of the car that they have planned is going to clearly address a lot of that stuff, and I think it's great that they pioneered a platform and are dedicated to kind of bringing it back for the following season. So, I don't know. I'm interested to see how the car actually is able to compete, and I'm hoping that they had so much working time now, with the car to be able to know exactly what the issues are they need to kind of go through,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be cool. I think above all, like I said, I'm just glad they're committed to it.
Yeah. I think it was hard, this weekend, I think even Travis's car, I know you mentioned this before, was just underpowered. I don't know if that's something that they can fix for the rest of the season. I do know that I think that from a driving capability, it puts Travis at a much better advantage because he's just got so much seat time in that S13.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, truth be told, I mean, I don't know if it's enough. I know I saw, from some of the Instagram stuff, it looked like they were, trying to do some things, whether it be nitrous or tuning or whatever it was, to try to make the car a little bit more power, to make it a little bit more competitive. But I do think that it's, it's not nearly probably what would be ample if that was the intended vehicle before the start of the season. Yeah. All right. So you ready to hop back to number 10?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So you're at point number 10. Odi Bakchis falls early again. It seemed like there was some mechanical issue there, right?
Yeah, man. I don't know. What's a guy got to do to keep winning races? Obviously, he doesn't know the answer. But he'd be doing it.
It's too bad because he was explosive at the first part of the season. We were really talking about some potential solid things, through rounds 1, 2, and kind of even 3, right?
Yeah, I mean, he said give me a sec to rethink this, but he said he had a drivetrain issue. They didn't want to fix it in top 32, so they band-aided it. I forget now who he battled in top 32, but he won. Then it seemingly seemed like it was bad enough that they borrowed Matt Field's hauler, drove it into the hauler so they could work under it. And they went to work on it, I guess, accomplished something that made them feel good. And then they had the unfortunate pleasure of battling against Dayoshi when Dayoshi was pretty unstoppable this weekend.
Yeah. I'll give you that. All right, moving on. Go ahead.
He faced Dirk Stratton in top 32.
Fair. All right, moving on to point number 9. Falcon continues the domination of Evergreen Speedway. Go ahead.
You don't seem very excited about this one, but
I'm very excited. I'm very happy for them.
It's kind of neat. I mean, I was just doing a little historical pullback, and Falcons won this event in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. Some serious dominance on one tire. Frederick Aasbo was the last one, not on Falcon to win all the way back in 2015. It's a long time ago.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool. And then, they backed it up this weekend with a Falcon podium sweep.
Yeah, that I saw. Which is great for a company. Here's my question. Do you really do we see these periodically, they come up or whatever it may be. Do you really honestly feel that this is really a credit to the tire, or is this something, where it matches kind of the track configuration, the surface, etc., or do you think that this is just a coincidence? What's your gut feeling?
It's hard for me to say, but I'll tell you this: when you talk to a driver who's willing to be honest with you, and what I mean by that is like, they have enough trust that you're not going to go repeat what they have to say. Yep. Or let's say they're a Formula Drift driver who's now retired, who doesn't have some affiliation.
Sure.
Or a younger driver who doesn't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
They will all pretty consistently tell you that there is a significant difference from tire to tire. Now, there's a lot of difference. Some people have various preferences, you have to really, in any racing, right? It's not just limited to drifting. In any kind of racing, you've got to set your car up for the tire that you're on.
Right.
A Michelin Pilot Sport 2 and an all-season Goodyear are not going to handle the same way on a racetrack, right?
Not at all.
There's things you've got to change, things you've got to compensate for. And I think it's that in drifting. I don't know if you'd find a consensus of where the best tire is. And I think some tires can do better at other things. Some of these tires burn down way faster than others. To be honest, I don't even really know all the differences. And one of my dreams back when Rec Magazine was still around, and we got as close as we could have gotten to executing, but never across the finish line, is we wanted to actually buy every tire and then run a test. Basically run a lap, document the change of the tire, run a lap, and basically run each tire down to its cords, and then do a value per dollar for grassroots drivers, saying right. You bought this Falcon and you got $6 a lap, this, whatever, and then try and compare some of the other wear patterns and things. But it was too big of a project that we could never really find a sponsorship for, so it never got off the ground. But I do think there is something to be said about the tire. I don't think it's a end all be all, but there's definitely some elements there that are key.
Yeah, I agree just from hearing people even in the Pro 2 and Pro-Am side of things when they don't have any kind of tire affiliation and they kind of jump between, let's say, an Achilles or one of the Federals or something like that, and then listening to them have feedback on that. But anyhow, I wasn't trying to insinuate one thing or another. I was just kind of curious if you felt that sometimes when these stars align and tire companies sweep, do you think that there's really something to credit to the tire matching up with the surface that weekend, or is it just kind of a coincidence? So I think you did a good job.
I would say maybe a podium sweep is maybe something that could be coincidental. A few guys just on top of it in a weekend, but to win an event 4 years in a row, I think says that there's probably something going on with that tire and that, whatever it is, the track surface, the ambient temperatures.
Right. Gotcha. Moving on to point number 8, Justin Pollock missed a possible victory with mechanical failure. It's too bad. He looks really good when he's driving right now.
Yeah, Justin Pollock is probably like the driver I get frustrated with the most in Formula D. I don't know why I still believe in him, but I just...
don't say it like that.
Well, he's so good, man. And like when he's on it, it's like so hard to imagine him doing anything other than being on it.
Right.
I mean, I think it was just last race. I mean, it feels like 7 years ago, but last race, I mean, he did the 100-point run.
Right.
The second one ever in Formula D history. Looked amazing doing it. The lap was unreal. Like I don't think half the drivers out there could duplicate that. But what can you do? It was unfortunate because I really think he was handing James Deane his lunch when his car broke.
Yeah.
I think if you judge the run from that point, I think he definitely had an advantage. So, it would have ended differently. Granted, if he beats Deane and everything happens the same, he would be on the podium. He's a Falcon driver, so that still would have held true, but it's a shame.
Right. Moving on to point number 7, Kenton Frederick Aasbo let off the gas. Man, this is like I felt like Seattle had a great deal of controversy all within the actual competition. It was pretty wild.
All really in the top 16 too, pretty much.
Right. That's a great point. And so I guess we're referring to the incident we were talking about where Aasbo versus Deane, and they kind of had a wild little accident there, huh?
Yeah. I still really don't know what to make of this situation. There's a twofold issue, I guess. The way the rules are stating now, where you can't spin at the finish line, you're obviously encouraging both drivers to keep driving past the finish line. But then, I mean, this is obviously a freak accident, so maybe we shouldn't dwell too long on it. But then, at the same time, you run into this issue where at what point in a run are the judges no longer judging?
Yeah, like, we've mentioned this before.
Yeah, but like this is like even another extenuating circumstance. So like obviously they've established they've got to pay attention past the finish line. I don't have a stopwatch on me, but they've got to be a good 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds past the finish line.
Right.
And basically what happens is neither of them decide to stop hot dogging around the course, so to speak. And Deane starts kind of letting off and coming down on the bank, and Aasbo was still in drift. And I think they hit a wheel, like Aasbo's front wheel hit his back wheel, shot the car in the air, and launched him off the curbing. And both cars got seriously damaged. Pretty wild incident. I think the only thing that really didn't sit well with me or that I necessarily maybe would have done differently is they assigned the blame to Aasbo, which I think is probably the easy way out in a sense that he was the car in the chase, right?
Well, and he came out quickly and took the blame for that.
Yeah, which, I think changes the conflict maybe a little bit.
Right.
But to me, I think it's regardless of who was at fault, I think as long as you don't feel like there was any malice in a situation like that, to me, I think it's a no fault. Let the two guys fix their cars and run. Now, if James Deane had slammed on his brakes and turned into Aasbo, I might feel a little bit differently. But it's nice that Aasbo was forthcoming to say I made a mistake, I was in the chase, which I don't disagree with him. But at the same time, the judges issued him at fault, which was significant in that he only got 5 minutes to fix his car. Deane got 10. I just feel like they both should have got 10 minutes. Is an off-track incident, I guess, if you want to determine it almost that way.
Right.
But, probably going to take another 15 years to see that happen again, I would imagine. So
listen, but shout out to Papadakis Racing there, because they fixed that car lickety-split. That's impressive. They are really, Stefan and his team is they're crazy. What they can do is just...
they blow like 13 motors a year, so
No, I understand, but
they got a lot of practice.
I mean, but like, and I will say, I mean, their teams are pretty well versed. But I mean, and you can see Castro, the Castro portion of that team, they jumped in there too. But they went ham, and I really, even watching it on the live stream, I was really like, they're gonna be close. Like they're gonna have this car operational, but they're not gonna finish. Then the clock almost got down to like, I feel like, I don't know, like 8 seconds or something like that. And still watching it, I'm like, oh, they're far along, but they're not done enough to drift. And they're like, no, we're good. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty impressive. So, not that anybody cares, just thought that was impressive.
Yeah, I know what you mean. That's where my one sticking point, I guess, was, or my issue is like just let them run.
Right.
You know, there's no loss.
Right.
I guess my point is, imagine in a different world where Aasbo doesn't fix his car in 5 minutes, and now Deane is advanced. Like, is that the way
you want to take the win? Is that the type of atmosphere you want to set for?
Yeah, no, I'm sure Deane wants to win regardless, you know. I mean, he's a competitor. He wants to win, but like, I think it would have been a real big jip of the fans, and I think put a lot of eyes on the championship. You know, how about this? Deane beat Aasbo so these two exact drivers by 4 points last year, right? Correct? In the championship. So if this was last year and that same thing happened and you gave Aasbo 5, Deane 10, Aasbo doesn't fix his car, I mean, that's essentially a loss of the championship and a post-finish line accident.
Yeah. No, I understand.
That's all. I think just some context there, but
no, I think your point's valid because now we're talking about things that could influence, kind of affect the series. So we're talking about how do you want your series to be viewed as far as this whole judging compound. They've spent so much time trying to make the judging less subjective, and I feel like this one added, kind of that ambiguity back into it to make it more subjective. So I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, I think it's one. Like I said, I think it's a 1 in 10 year incident. So
right, yeah.
I don't think it's too much to worry about.
Right. Number 6, moving on here. Vaughn Gittin Jr. versus Ken Gucci. You're saying, hey, the new rivalry.
Maybe.
Let me tell you before you even get started with your point and explain this whole thing, I will tell you what's awesome. It's really nice. I feel like, and I think I said this last time, Ken Gucci really feels like he's turned something on. Like, out of nowhere, we've said for years that he's kind of like the most, or I said it for a while, that I feel like he's one of the most, I don't want to say underrated, but underappreciated drivers in FD, right? And for whatever reason, whether it be mechanical, things just weren't clicking his way. But I feel like these last few events, I feel like he was really there. He was present. He made some moves where people were watching him. You know what I mean?
I agree. He's definitely been charging, I guess, so to speak. We'll get into obviously what happened this weekend, but if you remember last event, Gucci and Vaughn battled. Gucci made a bunch of comments on Facebook about how he felt about it. Things deteriorated quickly one way or another. I've been told, I wasn't there obviously, by another driver, that in the drivers' meeting in Seattle, Gucci asked a question about their incident, and Vaughn kind of got in his face Vaughn was like shouting across the drivers' meeting to him about the battle. So that all is a primer to then what happens here.
Right.
I think makes it a little more interesting. That's why I think it's, possible, whatever, new rivalry, I want them to battle in St. Louis real bad.
New rivalry from possibly the two OGs of the series.
I know. Two guys that have been around
since
forever. 2004.
just do a quick rundown on exactly what happened for people that don't exactly know. What you want to...
Sure. So this is my version of what happened.
Okay.
Is that, well, how about this? I'm going to tell you how I saw the run happen, in my opinion.
Okay.
And then I'll build all the new information that had come about.
Okay.
So they're battling. Vaughn Gittin Jr. is in the lead. Looks like as they're coming off the bank, Ken Gucci gets lost in the smoke, goes super inside, and I'm like, oh, well, Vaughn Gittin Jr. won. Right as I'm thinking that, Vaughn Gittin Jr. basically like over-rotates, comes to a stop, stalls, and what seemingly looks like two very independent incidents that have now happened at the same time. Vaughn is back on the gas. Gucci then hits him, kind of, I forget where, in the front or rear a little bit. Vaughn completes the track. They both get zeros of incomplete runs for that battle. They're judged on the other battle, and Gucci is declared the winner.
Right. So Vaughn was pretty vocal about the issue of not... He felt that he was going to drive into a T-bone. He felt that he was going to drive into an accident was his point, correct?
Yeah, so I guess he went to the judge's stand, complained a lot, and then basically got on Instagram. His Instagram has, I would say, the most concise...
of his point of view.
Of his point of view, if you're interested. I didn't quote it because he's a little bit all over the place. I don't want to say that he's like mumbling a lot, but he's just kind of like circularly.
He was upset about it. So
he was upset.
Right. He was explaining everything all at one time.
Yeah, so it just didn't make for a great... I feel like when I wrote it out, it didn't translate really as a direct quote. So what he's saying is in his peripheral vision, he saw Gucci and aborted. So now, I mean, once again, you basically just got the judges trying to make a judgment call. This is how I looked at it, to me, it's inconclusive. I can't really see evidence for one way or the other, so I would have to treat it as Vaughn just making an error. To me, there's a few things that I find really difficult about the situation from Vaughn's case. Number one, I think by dialing in all that angle, he didn't really help himself prevent contact. Number two, if he was really that concerned about being hit, wouldn't you just come to a stop? Like, you know what I mean? Like, just park it. Like, if you're in drift, like this, and then Gucci's coming like this, but like Gucci has momentum this way, and if you guys both keep going like this, you're going to hit, stop, right? Let Gucci go by, or whatever the case may be. But I think it's really weird. So I'm like, just shut the car down or like rotate, like if genuinely that's your concern, especially if you're afraid of being T-boned, just clutch kick, like rotate the car and let Gucci hit your rear end.
Right.
Or whatever the case may be. The other problem I have with what Vaughn is saying is I think if he would have actually just stayed in drift at regular speed, I don't think they would have hit.
Right.
I don't know. So then I think that's that side of it. The other side of it is people are saying, well, Ken Gucci should have stopped. Ken Gucci put himself in a dangerous position. When I say all these people, I mean the Vaughn Gittin Jr. fans yelling at me in the Maximum Drift cast.
I don't understand the whole stop thing.
If you look, here's what happened, in my opinion. Gucci got lost in the smoke, comes out, has no idea where he is. If you want to see a perfect example of this happening where the driver kept drifting and nothing happened, they didn't get close, I will admit, was in the top 32 battle, ironically, with Ken Gucci and Federico in the Ferrari.
Yep.
Gucci's in the lead. Federico clearly gets lost in the smoke, comes out, kind of does the same thing. Gucci keeps driving, and they kind of miss each other. I'm sure it didn't feel good for Gucci, but it's like he kept driving. Now, I feel like my stance has gotten a little misconstrued, but it's like people are like, oh, you're saying like Vaughn should put himself in harm's way. And it's like, well, not exactly, but if you really genuinely think you're going to be in grave danger, in my opinion, you would stop or avoid the accident, which he did not do. But then the other issue is that just like, you've got to imagine Ken Gucci doesn't want to crash into you as much as you want to crash into him. You guys are both professional race car drivers in a professional racing circuit. So it's like, just keep driving. And you know what? If Gucci doors you or hits you or whatever the case may be, hey, you're not going that fast. Speeds are under 50 miles an hour.
Right, and your cars are built to take an impact, but I don't want to say anything that sounds callous on not taking concerns of somebody's safety seriously, regardless.
I understand,
but
I just think if you're making a reactionary move to a car that's behind you or like to the side of you, I guess at that point, you've got to be prepared that there's going to be an outcome where you lose because of that action.
Yeah.
I mean, how about this? This is something that just popped in my head, so it might not make the most sense, but think about this. Like if you did that in any other racing scenario and someone else passed you, like you're not getting your spot back.
Right.
If you're in Formula One, NASCAR,
wheel to wheel, anything. Yeah.
If you were to go really wide and stall out so this guy didn't hit you and then the field passed you, they're not going to be like, oh, well, you are avoiding an incident. Go back up into first place. You've got to drive your way back. It's the same result. So like, it's kind of, to me, I guess it's consistent with what would happen in other racing. So I feel bad for him, and if it's the case where he truly felt like he was going to be in a dangerous accident, then by all means, I understand why he stopped. I mean, he's a dad now. I'm sure he thinks about those things a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, like, that's racing.
Yeah. I don't think there's really much that I can bring to the table here that's what happened. And honestly, I don't know. I mean, it's not going to be the first time a racer is dissatisfied with the call. So,
for sure.
Right?
Probably not even that weekend.
Right. So I don't know. I'm going to move it on. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Point number 4, Dylan Hughes proves himself on the big stage. And listen, Dylan's a talented driver. And the fact that, he's kind of neck and neck with Travis Reeder for the Rookie of the Year, I think is an interesting thing because they're both from the Pacific Northwest. They're both boys, like they're friends, like legitimate friends. What?
I said they were friends. No, we'll see how they feel after Irwindale.
Remember, Dylan Hughes is the person that last year in the Pro 2 championship, the last round, was the only person that could have overtaken Travis Reeder for the championship. And right. In the match the only match he had to win, his car, right before that match, Dylan wrecks his car. Travis runs down. Travis already eliminated. He runs down to the pits, and he takes his own personal car out and starts taking the parts off of it so that they can get Dylan Hughes' car back up and running before the run, so they can essentially help him be able to beat him for the championship. And that did not happen. So I think that shows the testament of friends that these dudes are at. Dylan's a great driver. I mean, first year in Pro 2 last year and could have been a champion.
Yeah, so, he seems like a great driver in a not so great car. I mean, I made that comment, I think, already. Commentary. I mean, what did I say? Dylan Hughes has spent most of his rookie season looking upset at a broken BMW. I think that sums it up.
Right.
It didn't break this weekend. He beat Ryan Turk.
Yeah.
Bam. He lost to Chris Forsberg. It was kind of funny. It was like the blackout battle, I guess, or whatever.
Okay.
Permatex, gum out, blackout.
Yeah.
AutoZone battle or whatever.
Right.
But it's interesting, Hughes had worked for Forsberg. They all do that show together. I think it was kind of cool and unique in that way. To me, I think what was impressive is that he was like willing to beat Turek. And And I don't mean like that he would have let Turek win, but like that it didn't like get in his head in one way or the other.
I wonder if being, because they're friends too. I wonder if being friends actually eases that a little bit or not.
Maybe.
You know what I mean? Just because like you feel like you can go put it all out there, you're not really intimidated by him as a person. You just know that you have to rise to the challenge, or like you almost have nothing. And I think he said this in the live stream. You almost have nothing to lose because you're expected to lose in that match. You know what I mean?
Right. He was the underdog.
Yeah, and so to be the underdog and to really perform like that, I think is pretty substantial. It says a lot about him as a driver, I think.
That's interesting. I don't have any friends, but if I ever get some, I'll test that theory and we'll get back to it.
All right. Moving on to point number 3. Did Chelsea Denofa overcommit, or was it a park? Man, here we go. I don't know. This is like one of those ones. I watched this run a bunch of times. I watched this one a couple times with you before we started the podcast. I wish I felt, I've watched all the comments. I've seen all the comments, people going nuts on this, and I still don't know which way I truly feel. But, the truth is, I'm not really sure that I totally see Chelsea's to do there. I don't really get it.
I don't know if Chelsea is wrong, but I also don't know if he's right.
Okay, so that sums up what I said much better.
I don't know. There's like almost like analysis paralysis going on the more I look at it. I think Chelsea has two things going against him in his argument. I think number one is that he's Chelsea. And I know that shouldn't matter, but at the same time, like, humans are human, right? You base your human mind somewhat off of like previous encounters, like your brain fills gaps.
Right.
Chelsea has a habit of following very aggressively and a lot of times not coming out of that aggressive follow. If you watched a highlight reel of every tandem follow battle he's ever had, there's a 25 to 40% chance he's crashing into someone and spinning out or stalling or messing up. So I think that's an issue, just speaking objectively. I think the second thing that looks bad in that case is he really is in a bad position on the track. He has shot really wide.
Yeah.
And then to make up for it, he comes in real shallow and almost kind of puts himself in a place where, like, I understand what he's saying. He's saying, like, I couldn't have gone any slower.
Right.
But you also could have driven the actual line of the track. Like, if he would have actually swung out and been in the right position, I think he would have had a lot more time to react.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, listen, he goes wide on that first outside zone, and then all of a sudden, first outside zone, but basically ends up getting on the infield, and then he's shallow to the clip. So it's almost like there's a speed thing, and Chris has already went wider, and now he's kind of transitioning the course on a better line, and it just didn't seem like they just didn't meet up in the right spots. Now, I love Chelsea as a driver. I think he brings. I mean, he's great in the chase position all the time, so it's great. Like, I don't know, I like that about him, but I think in this one instance, I think it's really maybe tough to point out that the issue was Forsberg's speed. We talked about this right before we got on, and I was watching it. I was like, well, I guess I could kind of see it did look like Forsberg was a little bit slow in that area, but then, like you pointed out, so was you don't think he did anything different than any other driver in that same spot kind of consistently throughout the field.
Yeah, normally I'm one of the first people to complain about the poor camera angles for Formula D.
Yep.
But they actually had a perfect camera angle for that turn, and it's like when you watch it, I think the best case argument you could make is that Chris maybe rotates or transitions like slower than some of the other cars. Maybe.
Right.
But that's not a crime. That's not a penalty.
No, and he was the chase driver. So it's kind of like...
Right. Chelsea should be mirroring what's happening.
Right.
But then, like, when you watch Chris's car from that angle, like, there's no... Like, the suspension load's not changing. The car's really smooth. It doesn't look like there's any kind of extreme, like, off the gas or clutch. I mean, the car literally is not changing. There's no brake. There's no clutch kick. There's no power. I mean, it actually looks really smooth. So from a watching the chassis standpoint.
And now I'll say one thing that I read, and I've read this comment multiple times, and people say, well, you can see Chris's smoke line kind of starts to dissipate. But I'll argue that in that transition, in that same spot, with cars that are a little bit underpowered for the track, maybe you can kind of see that same minor dissipation in that transition there as well. I think it's kind of a hard argument to call based off the visual of the smoke. So, I don't know.
There's also some people that I've read that said he let off the gas for 5 seconds, and I'm like, gee, I don't know what kind of...
5 seconds, I think you'd be on the other part of that turn.
I don't know what kind of watch you got, but...
Right. Don't use it over here.
Yeah. So how about this? Before we move on, I'm going to read you Chelsea's quote.
Oh, I like it.
It states it.
I like it.
And one of the reasons I published the quote in the article on FormulaD.com/news or news.formulad.com is that when I read his quote and break down what he's saying, I don't agree with what Chelsea's saying.
Okay.
Which maybe he's just not presenting it right because obviously he's kind of giving a hot take post-event. But based on what we said, and then if you read what he's saying, they're not the same thing. So I find that a little interesting. He says, I gave Chris some space, closed in on some spots, got right where I needed to be going across the inner clip. Is that where he needs to be? Like, that's what I mean. Like, I mean, maybe, but like, if you look at most other people's chases, they're not doing that. So, like, maybe he felt like he was where he needed to be.
But I think that all in itself is subjective because needs to be when you're a chase driver is different than needs to be when you're a lead run.
Sure, but he's not cutting that inner clip when he's leading.
But all right. But what I'm saying is, like, even if you were saying that, for the actual track, you were close to the clipping point. At this point, your job is to mirror the line and, with as close proximity as you can to the lead run. So
correct.
That wasn't really happening there either, right?
Correct. Yeah. So that's my point. I already think in the first 15 words, I'm not really jiving with what he's saying. For some reason, he referring to Chris Forsberg, just didn't really get on the gas. He floated out wide.
Yeah, questionable.
I don't really know if he floated out wide either.
Right.
But if he did float out wide, let's just say for argument's sake, perhaps that's why he's a little slower in the transition because he's trying to point himself. There have been, in the history of Seattle, several people that have spun out on that turn or crashed in that turn. So, like, maybe he got a little nervous. He's like, oh, I'm out wide. Let me just, make sure I'm flicking right and not, like, turning. Just argument's sake, I don't know. I was sitting there being patient.
All right. Don't say it. Keep going.
Okay. Trying to give him room, and I literally could not go any slower than we were going. I think he means I was going. And as soon as I bumped him, he picked up the gas and went. You guys make your own decision on what happened with that. I think he played some games.
I think that I don't know that I feel that he was really ever off the gas all that much, but two, I think that there's this issue of, he's transitioning. So I think it can look like, but I mean, again, smoke line still shows commitment. So, I mean, I don't know.
That's what I mean. It's tough. And the other issue is it's like, I think Chelsea did put himself in the spot where I definitely agree with Chelsea is that he was giving him room, and he literally could not go any slower than he was going. But I think that's a recipe of him really shortcutting, choking that clip.
And he wasn't moving slow. You know what I mean? Like, I mean,
well,
Chelsea
he was
had good.
He was in the process of slowing down, and I think here's what's interesting. If Chelsea could have been a half mile an hour slower, or Forsberg was a half mile an hour faster, that's literally what we're talking about. Like this, they literally hit like, bumper in bump, like bumper to bumper, like barely a graze.
Yeah.
I also don't know like what Forsberg really had to gain from that. Like it's kind of a weird thing because, like, let's say they didn't hit and Chelsea swung back into him right then.
I don't know. I think this part might be tough because it becomes completely subjective, and you'll have people say, well, the reason he did that was because he wanted to throw Chelsea off. Like, he saw him at a disadvantage, and I think that's a lot of planning in the heat of the moment, but I guess it happens if you're that skilled of a driver.
Maybe, but also, like, this is, I guess, my point, though. Like, if Chris was slowing down and Chelsea hadn't shortcutted the corner, which, mind you, there's no way Chris knows if Chelsea has shortcutted the corner. I mean, really. I mean, he's sitting in a Halo seat with a Hans device strapped into a car.
I mean, I will say the live stream is getting better, so maybe he was watching it on his phone. Maybe.
With a little carbon fiber mirror that I don't know if you've ever watched their mirrors, but they do this. Like, I've sat in that car before, and the mirror's like...
Right.
But just to me, it's like... I don't know. It's hard to say. But it's like, also, I think... What I'm trying to say is, if Chelsea had been on a wider line and Chris had slowed up like that and Chelsea had the opportunity to slow down, I think it would have resulted in Chelsea winning. So, like, to me, it almost didn't really work in his favor. Now, where I'll defend Chelsea is that Jeff Jones hit Chris in the same place.
Right.
So, maybe there's an issue there. Or maybe people are just hitting Forsberg a lot. I don't know. I think where I came down to is that I'm really glad I wasn't a judge. I can't really see the brake check or I guess Chelsea didn't say he brake checked. He just said he was playing
slowed. Yeah.
I don't see it enough to rule in Chris's favor. At the same time, I want to believe Chelsea. Obviously, Chris hasn't spoken the matter, so I don't have his quote to reference, but like, I don't necessarily feel like everything Chelsea's saying in his quote is what I'm seeing on the track either. So it's like maybe he just has a little bit of frustration, a little bit of a perception of where he was on the track versus where he, actually was. I'd love for him to like break down the battle and talk about it. He used to do that on YouTube. Like if he did that,
yeah, they were great.
I think now would be a great time to back that up, but it's tough, man. I think I would have agreed with the judges on that one just because I don't think there's enough evidence. To me, to say that a driver is brake checking or doing that, I think you need beyond a preponderance of evidence. Like, I would say I'm 50-50. I think for a judge to ding Forsberg for it, I think you've got to probably be 75-25.
Yeah,
There's like, to make that bold of a claim to say, like, you're doing this intentionally to win, I think you've got to be like beyond confident that that's what's happening, unfortunately.
Right.
But I guess that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, no, I can see that. So I don't know. I think it's hard. We're not in the car. We don't have the same perception, and I think in the heat of the moment, I think there's a lot of things that you can feel one way or another about where we can watch a run and be a little bit more black and white with it. So whatever. Anyhow, moving on. Your point number 2, championship chase is now wide open. Man, this thing really took a turn and kind of, I feel like it's bouncing around quite a bit this year.
It's been interesting. This has been probably one of the most inconsistent years of Formula Drift. Generally, you find a guy, when you look back at like Forsberg's last championship, like he didn't win an event, but he was on the podium for all the rounds but one.
Right.
He finished second or third, 7 times out of 8. So usually the road to a championship is consistency. Right now, no one's being consistent. I imagine the percentage of people that are actually like watching Formula D from like a championship perspective is pretty small compared to other sports. But if you are like a championship nerd and you get real into the statistics and the points and everything, I think this is the series for you. I estimate now it's a 6-person race. I want to say last round I said it was a 4-person race.
Right.
And it would have been real interesting if a guy like Turek had beat Dylan Hughes and pushed through. Maybe Turek had been on the podium instead of Yoshihara, for example. Because right now Turek's 53 points back, and I basically pontificated that he's probably the guy I'd say is still in the championship. The interesting thing now is that St. Louis to me is a must-watch. I unfortunately do not get a commission for the number of tickets I sell or live streamers I put in seats, but I guess I digress. The interesting thing is I think St. Louis is much-watch viewing. It was my favorite track. I had a lot of experience with it. We did Street Driven Tour, RIP, there a few years before Formula just copied us and came to the same track here nor there.
Okay.
But what I think is really special or interesting is that they changed the track this year for St. Louis.
This I don't know, so.
Completely. I haven't paid as much attention, but they've released photos. I don't actually understand how they're going to run. St. Louis was the fastest and kind of coolest track, but it was very similar to Texas.
Right.
What I've gathered is they've paved some extra parts of the track to almost make like a roval. And I'm imagining what they're going to try and do is push the whole drift battle closer to the main track so they can use that grandstand. There's a big problem with that infield. I wasn't in St. Louis last year, so I don't know how they worked it, but I mean, when we were doing Street Driven Tour, we were filling that infield almost.
Yeah.
And so there's like a under pathway to like, I think where like people had their rigs like outside the track. And so logistically it's kind of a nightmare. They had to bring grandstands in. So I'm sure nothing was kind of cheap operationally about that. I'm sure the drivers didn't like being far from their rigs and whatnot. So what I imagine they're going to try and do is close the infield, and then where they were using the entry before in that whole area, I think what they're going to do is use that area for the grid, and then basically like people will be able to watch from the NASCAR grandstand, go under, and then come into the pit row. But I think why that's important, especially if you're not going to be there, is now you're back at a new track. No drivers have any data.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you've got 6 guys in the championship race. You've got a fresh track with no data. I think it makes things pretty interesting.
Yeah, man, I don't know about the roval. I don't enjoy ovals, and I don't know how I feel about rovals. But
well, I mean, I don't know if it's technically a roval. I forget who that. I think that comes from Charlotte Motor Speedway, right? They run the roval race, which is like half
I believe so.
I don't know if that's what they're doing, but it seems to me if you look at where the pavement was placed, they basically were more connecting the road course and the main course. Yeah. I will say if they run the NASCAR bank there, I think it'd be pretty sweet. It's really long and flat. But I guess we'll see. It's must-see viewing August, whenever, 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th, 11th, 12th, something like that.
Yeah, it is.
Tune in, find out. I think it's
August 8th through the 10th.
And look at me. I'm a Formula Drift promo machine.
I love it. Yeah, it's going to be good. And, tune in. All right, let's see here. Wiecek, he's back in form in his grade 8 losing streak. I don't know, man. So he's...
I know. You can only beat this drum so long. But it was interesting that he had lost every battle in the grade 8. I feel like we're both fading over here.
Oh, my God.
But he's lost every round in the grade 8, and then he pulled out a win here. So props to him.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have anything more to add to this point. I agree with you.
Let's go home.
Let's do it. We have hoped that you, we have labored through this one for you. We hope that you have enjoyed it. We brought you controversy. We brought you guest appearances.
That's pretty exciting.
That was exciting, right? Having
I
Travis.
think you should just call random drivers.
I'm just going to call people, and they're going to be like, "Who is this?" And I'm like, "It doesn't matter. Just answer the question." That's it. We're out. We're done here. We've done our work. We will be back with you after St. Louis. So hopefully the week following August 10th-ish.
I'm excited.
I'm elated. I can't wait. I'm so happy.
I'm excited. You're excited. How about that?
Thank you. All right, I'm going to wrap this one up. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, that's it for this one. For more info on the podcast, head over to konigwheels.com/podcast. If you like what we're doing here, please subscribe. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, all at Konig Wheels USA. Listen, we're on YouTube and, some iTunes and Google Play and stuff, so, whatever.
Like, subscribe, comment.
Do it all. Do it all. Push the bells. I don't care. Do it all.
4.5 stars.
5. Anyhow.
5 stars only.
All right, that's it. We're out of here. Till next time. Peace.